Welcome to the This Is Horror podcast. I'm your host, Michael David Wilson, and I'm joined with my co-host, Bob Pastorella. Bob, how's it going?
Hey, Michael, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
All good, thank you. We just finished up a call with Stephen Graham Jones, so we have an exciting two-part interview on its way for our listeners.
Definitely. This is going to be excellent.
Yeah, what would you say are some of the highlights that our listeners have to look forward to?
Well, definitely we talk about werewolves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we talk about his latest book, Mongrels. And we talk about some other books that he's written, some, and stuff that, trying to get some news on some stuff that we definitely would like to see from him. We talk a lot about writing. I mean, it's just a great episode, or two episodes. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Epic.
And you're just really only touching on a few things because we covered a vast amount. I mean, we also spoke about the last year where he consciously decided not to publish a novel. So we talk a little bit about the emotional and financial implications of that. We talk about working with a new literary agent and publicist. And we also have a load of questions from our patrons that we ask as well. So, quite honestly, it's vast, isn't it?
Oh, yes. And still, you've only hit the tip of the iceberg.
I know.
It's going to be, like I said, this is definitely a couple of epic shows coming up here.
Oh, yeah. And with that said, I believe that you have his bio.
Yes, I do. Stephen Graham Jones is the author of All the Beautiful Sinners, Demon Theory, The Elvis Room, The Gospel of Z, After the People Lights Have Gone Off, and the forthcoming Mongrels, amongst many, many other books and collections. He was born and raised in Texas. He lives in Boulder, Colorado now with his family. He has Blackfeet. He is into werewolves and slashers and zombies. He would wear pirate shirts a lot if he could find them, and probably carry some type of sword. And that is Stephen Graham Jones.
With that said, I think, Bob, we should just get right into the interview with Stephen Graham Jones.
I agree. Let's do it.
All right. Here it is. Our interview, part 1, with Stephen Graham Jones.
And now for our horror interview.
Stephen, welcome back to the This Is Horror podcast.
Man, thanks for having me again. I like being here.
Yeah, you're always very welcome. I thought to begin with, so it's been over a year since we last spoke with you on the podcast, and I thought I'd start with a pretty big question. What's the most important thing you've learned in the last year?
Oh, wow.
I'm not pulling any punches to begin with.
It's probably to do whatever my publicist says as fast as I can. That's the biggest thing I learned, I think. Oh, but I also learned maybe to quit buying so many old trucks, because I bought me a beautiful old truck, but it's been the biggest headache in the world.
Right. With the publicist, is that a new publicist that you're working with?
It is. It's my new publicist, Jessie Edwards at Mongrels. She's really great. And everything she says is good. So what I've learned is to follow her, to do what she says.
Yeah, what are some of the lessons that you've learned as a result of working with her?
To don't be hesitant to change my schedule to allow for whatever she wants me to do, I guess.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you have done in terms of promoting Mongrels? Maybe things that you did for this release that you haven't done previously?
Oh man, was it just yesterday? Maybe yesterday or the day before, I was at a symposium out at the Stanley Hotel, this haunted, this big fun thing. And then she needed me to be at a photo shoot in Denver in an hour and a half, and the Stanley is 2 hours from Denver, and it was snowing like crazy. You couldn't see nothing, but I made it, man. I made it in an hour and a half somehow, and I even had time to stop for a double meat Whopper from Burger King. So.
There you go. You've got your priorities straight there.
Yeah.
It would have been better if it would have the double meat from Whataburger, though. You have to
Yeah,
admit.
that would have been so much better. I wish Whataburger would come this far north, but the closest one I can find is either Amarillo or Santa Fe, man.
It's definitely a Texas thing.
Yeah, it is, man. And that's, people always ask about Texas. Do I miss the sunsets? Do I miss the wide open spaces and all that? And sure, I do, but I miss Whataburger more, man.
Yeah.
I don't even know what Whataburger is, so I guess it's not came to the UK, Portugal, Japan, or wherever else I've been hanging out.
It's an American food group.
Right.
It's its own food group.
Yeah.
Is it just a Texas thing, or?
Well, it's in New Mexico a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And they have them in, I think, Louisiana. But yeah, it's definitely a rural thing. The first one was in Texas. And, and the town I live in, we don't have one. We got to drive to, one town over. It's a 15-minute drive either way. But it's good stuff. I've never had a bad experience there. Never had a bad meal there, ever. I mean, it's consistently good, no matter where you go.
It totally is. I agree. The only person I know who's had a bad experience there was one of my friends in high school. He needed a quarter one night, so we said we'd pay him a quarter if he would eat a jalapeno, like a whole jalapeno you can buy from Whataburger. And and he was always eating hot things, so this wasn't that big of an issue for him. But we kind of snuck around and made the jalapeno a lot hotter by soaking it in mace, and then we gave it to him. So he had a bad experience.
I wouldn't necessarily blame that on Whataburger.
No, I don't think so. I blame it on being 17 years old at 2 a.m, man.
Yeah.
Oh my God, mace. But it's a good thing you made it out of the Stanley Hotel alive. That's
man.
Yeah,
it was, and we got to go like late at night, since we were special guests or whatever. We got to go down in the tunnels and crawl around in the rocks and go to all the secret basements and stuff. It was really fun.
Oh, I can only imagine. Oh my God, that'd be crazy.
Yeah. Oh, and I knew the guy who was staying in 217 too. That was pretty cool, man.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that would be that's a rough experience there. It's not real. It's not real.
Yeah, but it's nice when you're at the Stanley and the snow starts coming in hard, because you feel like you're in for the season,
Well, I'm glad, Bob, that you transitioned back to the Stanley Hotel, because I was just trying to think, how can I segue from jalapenos and Whataburger back into Mongrels?
Yeah.
I tried to get it back.
Yeah. But speaking of Mongrels, so it's a werewolf story, but also a coming-of-age story, a story about dealing with hostility and conflict from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
What inspired the idea, and what, if any, were some of the tropes that you were conscious of avoiding going in?
Yeah. Oh man, I could answer that for 30 minutes probably. What inspired it was really a friend of mine, Jesse Bullington, called me up to submit a story to this anthology he was getting together, Letters to Lovecraft, from Stone Skin Press, I believe. And he said it had to be based on on something out of H.P. Lovecraft's supernatural horror fiction, that big essay he had, 70-80 page essay. Mm-hmm. And so I had that on my Kindle at the time, so I pulled that Kindle out and I searched that HPL thing for werewolf, and there was one instance of werewolf. And so I wrote Jesse back and I said, sure, because what that meant to me was, can I write a werewolf story? And so then I put that off, and oh man, it must have been October, November, maybe early December. And I realized that story was due the next day. And I had told Jesse right when I told him I'd do the story, I said, yeah, I'll do a werewolf story, and I'll base it on the act of telling stories. And I said it's going to be a lot like Neil Gaiman's issue of Sandman: The Hunt. I forget what number that is, but it's about a grandpa telling his granddaughter a werewolf story. And so then I ate a big old jug of chocolate covered sunflower seeds I had from Manitou Springs, and they gave me a lot of energy. And like in 4 hours, I wrote that first chapter, what used to be Doc's story. And I thought that was it. I put it away, and I went and doing other stuff for a month or two. But that story wouldn't be quiet. It kept crawling around in my head. And so then I sat down and I realized that that wasn't a story. That was a chapter one. And so I just chased it down for a couple of weeks and got the story down. As for where it comes from, though, like in a larger sense, it's my own family, my own upbringing, just the way I was raised and grew up. My first novel I ever wrote, Fast Red Road, I had no idea how to write a novel. So every time I hit a wall of what comes next, instead of like, posing around, being all tragic, saying writer's block and all that stuff, instead of doing that, I just reached into my own head, into my own life, and put down a piece of myself on the page and changed the names. And that's kind of been my pattern for writing novels ever since then, like 20 books later or whatever, is to mind my own life. And Mongrels does that as deeply as any of my books. I recognize all the people in it. I mean, they're werewolves, but they're my family too. And all those cars they take from place to place they're more or less cars we had that we had to keep running one way or another. You know, we were always moving around growing up, and I was always being the new kid at school and always in a new town that, I didn't know the rules of and all that. So I just kind of decided to try to tell that story with werewolves,
Well, we've mentioned writer's block on the show before, of course, but I think what you just said there could be the single best tip that we've had to mind your own life, because everyone has a history, everyone has a story to tell, and you do that, you put that into your fiction, and it becomes that bit more authentic as well.
It does. You invest in it in a different way on the page. Like you actually have to slow down a bit and remind yourself, make this real for the audience too, because it's already so like achingly real for you. You remember sitting in that Whataburger at 2 a.m. when you couldn't go home because something was going on at your house, and the trick is always just remember to make it real for the reader, because it's already so real for you.
Well, that ties in quite nicely to a question we've got from Jesse Lawrence on our Patreon.
Jesse.
Oh, yeah. Here he is. Yeah, graduated from the Booked podcast. And I shouldn't say graduated. I'm going to get a message now from Rob Olson. But yeah, Mongrels features a lot of relocating. How many of those drives have you been on? And have you ever found yourself horror movie stranded in the middle of a trek? And if so, what is the secret to surviving such a situation?
That's a good question, man. Man, I have burned Interstate 10 up, going back and forth east and west, and specifically, Mongrels kind of, yo-yos back and forth between either West Texas, Eastern New Mexico, and Florida, or Arkansas and Florida, kind of both of those. And when I was working on my PhD at Florida State, I wasn't any kind of fan of Tallahassee, so I got out of there after 14 months. I did all my coursework and I blasted, and where I landed was Little Rock, Arkansas. And in Little Rock, I was editing legal briefs and just living as cheap as I could. I may have been working at Sears too. I was always working at Sears, one place or another, it seems. But I needed the school to think I was still living in Tallahassee for some reason. I don't remember what it was, like residency, or I don't know what it was. But and so at the drop of a hat, I was always having to jump in the car after a shift or after some job and just blaze my way down to Tallahassee in 10 or 12 hours, and then sign a form at a desk like I just came from my apartment, and then just turn right around and come back as hard as I could. And it was like driving through a hallucination. You get pretty tired. And then I think right after that, I moved to Lubbock, Texas. and I had to do the same thing, but it's 10 extra hours, you know. So I would have to do a 22-hour push to get to Tallahassee, and I suspect that's where a lot of mongrels came from. Was me going back and forth on those roads, you know. It just kind of it gave the whole Southeast like this dreamlike quality, and I was just punching through it at 85 miles per hour, you know. But in answer to Jesse's question, yeah, I have been. I've been stranded so many times. Definitely, I've been chased by dog packs, just all kinds of stupid stuff. But the one I remember the best is not in the Southeast; it's in the West. I was driving some car. I don't know whose car. Maybe I was delivering a car for somebody. I don't remember. I was going across from probably Texas up to Washington or Oregon, somewhere up there. I was angling across Utah, I think it was, and I got lost. Like, this is way before GPS or any of that, and I can't read a map to save my life. So I stopped at a payphone and I called the operator and I said, "Hey, can you tell me where I am? I'm lost." And it turns out that legally she cannot tell me where I am. I could tell her the area code on the listed above the dial pad on the payphone, and she could tell me that area code is associated with like southeastern Utah or something, but she couldn't actually look on her switchboard or whatever, or screen or whatever it was, and tell me I was 12 miles from Provo or whatever it was, you know, which was kind of disconcerting. So I hung up, and I was at a rest stop, and they have those wide, low bathrooms with the kind of tile walls and the roof that's above the wall, like about 2 feet, so the sunlight can come in, so they don't have to worry about lights, power, and stuff. And I went in there to hit the bathroom, and I was wearing sandals for some reason. I don't know why in the world I was wearing sandals. They are not my favorite footwear, but for some reason that's what I had on. I walk in there, and your eyes don't adjust immediately. It's all dark and lost and smoky in there, but my feet are sticking to the ground, and I think, oh, it's one of those bathrooms. I don't really want to be in here very much, and so I'm kind of like clump. What's the word? Like my feet are sticking, but I'm walking anyways. Across the bathroom floor, and my eyes start to adjust, and I stop in the middle of that big empty bathroom, and my eyes adjust enough that I look down and I see that what I'm standing in is blood. It's like probably 3/4 of an inch blood over the whole floor of the bathroom, and I really had to pee, so I went over to the urinal and did that. And then I tried to step in my same footprints. The blood it wasn't like scabby or congealed yet, but it wasn't quite as liquid as it should be either. So I was able to kind of step where I had stepped, and I made it out of that bathroom. And I was, watching the stalls pretty hard because they were all closed. I didn't know what was in those stalls. I never looked. And on the way out, I took my sandals off. I stepped out of them, dropped them in the trash can, and got back in the car and kept going into some part of Utah that I had no idea where I was, but I knew I was going away from that place.
Man. Well,
we just got a story.
You certainly delivered on that answer. Oh, man. Well, I'm sure if it hasn't already, that event is going to appear in a future story of yours.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
The rest stops are scary places, man. I've slept in a lot of them. I remember one time when I was 14, I was driving from the reservation in Montana down to El Paso, and had a carload of people with me. I guess we didn't have hotel money or something, so we were just punching through like 35 hours of driving or whatever. And I was getting really sleepy, and I was 14, so I wasn't really old enough to drive anyways. And I distinctly remember somewhere, it probably would have been in Colorado, in the flat part of Colorado maybe. I remember waking up at 75 miles per hour in a rest stop. I had followed the white line into the rest stop, and so I was just burning through that parking lot like 6 times faster than you should go. And I was able to not kill anybody, not kill all of us, but that's still one of the scarier moments of my life, man.
Well, I know that Bob has some Mongrels questions that you wanted to ask, so I think this is a great time to deviate away from the blood in the restroom.
Woo!
I think this episode, I'm not even gonna pretend to be able to smoothly segue. I can tell already that it will be difficult, so let's just own it for what it is.
Yeah, abrupt segues. No, one thing in reading Mongrels, and it's just I have to know as a writer, I have to know,
Mm-hmm.
was the dual POV,
Mm-hmm.
going first person, then the same character third person,
Yeah.
deliberate or experimental
Mm-hmm.
or at the suggestion of your editor? I mean, what was the impetus behind that?
No, it wasn't at the suggestion of the editor or the agent. I doubt if either one of them are ever going to say, "Why don't you do something really crazy that people are going to wonder what's going on?" You know? It was definitely all on me, and I was just coming out of a project I'd been writing, a novel that fell apart. That I had tried to patch that novel by switching from first to third, like I don't know, the Elvis Cole novels do that, and let me think. There's a couple of other series I read that do that. They kind of make it work, and I thought maybe I could make it work, but turned out that was not the right thing to fix whatever that was I was writing. When my students try to do this, I always warn them away. I tell them this is just a patch. But with Mongrels, I think the reason I fell into that, um, it wasn't blind. No, it was definitely intentional. But when I started out writing Mongrels, I didn't realize I was writing a novel. I thought I was writing a series of stories with the same character in them. And so my idea was that I'm going to write like 8 or 10 stories with the same character, same set of people, and then I'm going to publish them around in different places, and people are going to be able to hunt those down and kind of stitch it together into a single narrative if they want to. But then I got about halfway through that, and I realized that this was taking a shape that was more like a novel than a series or collection or cycle of stories. And it had also fallen into that pattern of long, short, like a breather between each longer section. And at that point, the first to third was already in place. And the way I justified it to myself, which may not be the final justification anybody needs or is of use to them, is that I don't know if I want to give away the secrets. Yeah, I don't think it's a secret really. Really, if a story's good, and hopefully Mongrels is some approximation of good, then you shouldn't be able to spoil it. So my idea has always been that those little third person and interstitial pieces are written kind of by the narrator.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's the way I've allowed myself license to do it, anyways. And also I did try sucking them out at one point, like killing them all, because I thought maybe they're just background information that I'm doing for my purposes that doesn't actually belong in the book. So I pulled them all out, but what I found was that without padding between the longer first person pieces, that those slam together too hard. They don't, like, when they try to slam together, you see that they're at different geographies and different dates and stuff, and it didn't work without padding. So I think Mongrels needs some sort of padding. Whether those third person kind of career oriented flashbacky kind of materials, from 10 years ago, whether they're actually the right thing for padding, I don't know that. They felt right to me, and maybe hopefully they feel right to people who read them. But they're the only thing I could think of too.
I wouldn't necessarily call it padding. I would call it more like connective breathing room.
Yeah, no, that's a much better way. Maybe we can go back and edit your voice.
No, as a writer myself, I often think that of the weird things. It's like probably to me is once I hear the voice, that's when I can start writing. And sometimes that voice is in third person, and you kind of go, "Hey, whoa, 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 whoa! I thought this was going to be a first person book." So it's like maybe I could try it both ways, and that's the impression I got when I was reading Mongrels. I was like, I bet you he had that. I could try this both ways. Let's see if it works. But I see where you're coming from, because your original intent wasn't, initially it wasn't a novel, but it became a novel.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I don't, and me personally, this is my opinion. I think that it, as introduced as short stories and everyone hunting them down, would have been really, really cool. But as a novel, I think it's a lot more effective.
Oh, thank you. I hope so, man.
And it was phenomenal. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. I feel, I mean, of course, every novel you write is different. You come at it at a different angle. You're a different person by the time you're writing it. You need different tools to complete it. But the only thing I've ever found is at the end of a novel, if I don't feel like lucky, like I stumbled into some place that I didn't know existed, and if I don't feel like I'm getting away with something, then I feel like then I don't think I've done my job as a novelist. You know, I can't imagine finishing a novel and saying, "Oh, that worked out just like I meant it to." You know how smart I am. It's never been that's never happened. It's always I mean, I've got a lot of novels in my drawer that'll never see a light of day because they're like that. They just worked out like I planned, you know. But it's the ones that you stumble into. You fall into a new narrative space partway through it, and you understand the story in a completely different way, and it starts to write itself. And that's the kind of magic that I'm always looking for in and with a novel, you know. And so
it just seems more organic that way.
Yeah, no, it totally does. It totally does. So I mean, all the novels I've published have they're the ones that I've actually published instead of put in the drawer. They're the ones that I've stumbled into something that I didn't expect was there, you know.
Well, in terms of the novels that you've published and the novels that you've put in a drawer, I mean, what's the kind of ratio for that? And I guess as you're more established now, are you finding that the stories you start are more often than not then published? Or I could also see how it could go the other way, because obviously with some titles to your name, it may feel like, well, there's less to prove and you don't have to put out anything you don't want to anyway.
Yeah, no, that's true. And also now that I have, like, you know, enough books or whatever, that I have a little momentum, I could foreseeably publish one of those novels that I don't think is like up to snuff quite, you know. But hopefully I never do that. I mean, I can't guarantee I won't. I probably, if I ever do that, I'm not going to announce it and say, "Well, I'm finally doing it."
Yeah.
But
yeah, I needed the money. No.
Yeah, exactly. But as for what's the ratio, I think I've got, I don't know, I bet I've got 5 or 6 in the drawer right now, and I think I have 15 or 16 published. That means some ratio. I don't know how to do math, but it's something.
Sounds like a third.
Yeah, that's what it kind of sounds like to me too. Yeah, and I'm happy with a third, man. I don't mind having to write a lot to get a little, you know.
Yeah, well, it's a quarter, isn't it? If you've got 15 or 16 published and you've got 5 or 6 in the trunk. But yeah, it doesn't really matter the specifics of it. I think what's important is there are more that have been published than are in the drawer. You know, you've got it the other way around. That's a problem.
Yeah, no, it is. But you know, the last, like, I don't know, probably 6 years, I do have a higher ratio with stories because, you know, you write a story in an afternoon or two, it goes, I don't know, 6,000 words, 10,000 words, whatever, and then I'll send it to an editor. It's usually on, they usually solicit the story for me. They tell me what they need. I'll send it to the editor and they'll say, yes, I like it as is, or they'll say, no, it needs 80% of it overhauled. And then I can do the work to overhaul it in another afternoon or two. But with a novel, it's completely different. If I submit a novel and the editor, publisher, whoever gets back to me and says, this is 80% broken, then that's a much bigger task to try to repair, you know? And oftentimes I'll try to repair it just by writing a whole new novel instead, because I really think too many writers get involved with one novel or one project, one story, whatever, and they'll write that for years just trying to make it work when they never really realize that there's some conceptual flaw or there's some hindrance, something that's going to keep that novel from being what it needs to be, but they keep hammering at it and trying to make it work, and I think they lose a lot of their good writing years doing that.
Yeah, I think particularly if you're told, you know, there's like 80% changes that need to be made, you might as well take the themes, take the essence, take what it was that you fell in love with and made you write that story, and then put that into something fresh. Because I think after writing a project that's so long anyway, by the time you submit it, you've kind of lost some of the momentum anyway. So if you're told you now need to change more than half of it, I mean, that's about as demotivating a message as you're going to get, right?
It totally is. But I've had publishers do that to me too. I turned in a novel back in '03, probably it was, and the editor, it was like 250 pages, and he kept one page of it and said the rest of it's trash. And so
we liked the title.
Yeah, exactly. It was Seven Spanish Angels. Yeah, and we did that so many times, and by the time it was over, I'd written right around 2,000 pages to get 300, 350. And it was a long, arduous process, but I wouldn't trade it either. I learned so much about just how to shape a novel, how to craft a narrative. So. I mean, it can be an educational experience if you're working with a smart person, I think, or if you're working with someone who knows the business and knows the craft anyways.
Do you find that whenever you start a project that you have to see it through completion, or do you have many irons in the fire and try to work on all of them at one time?
I don't have the brain power to do many at once, I found. I can only write one novel at a time, or one screenplay, or one comic script, or whatever. But I don't make myself finish something if it's like rolling out of control, Like, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, I started what was going to be this big anthropological thriller talking about Neanderthal man and proto-human origins, all this stuff. And I was having so much fun with that novel. It was just writing itself. And I got to 120 pages in, and I looked around kind of at the story, and I realized I was having so much fun talking about early hominids that I had yet to even introduce the suspicion of an antagonist, and without an antagonist, a thriller is not a thriller, of course. And so instead of going back and trying to wedge an antagonist in there, I just quit, because I knew that I was really doing with anthropology the same way I did with my very first werewolf novel, Bloodlines. I wrote that back in, I want to say 99, I think it was. Could have been the very first month or two of 2000, I guess. And what I did was I loved the werewolf so much that I focused on it in a way which didn't tell a good story. I just really wanted to have an excuse to look at a werewolf, And that's what I was doing with this anthropology story. I just wanted an excuse to look at Neanderthals, and at the expense of the story. So someday I'll sit down and start from scratch all over again and do that novel, hopefully soon, because I really like the idea. But we should write about things we love, but we should also have control and remember that this is a story for other people, not just for me to look at Neanderthals or me to look at werewolves,
Right.
Well, if you don't go back and rewrite it as a novel, then I guess you've got 120 pages of creative nonfiction if you want to spin it in a different direction.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the market would be for that, but, well, you put it out there, you find out. I don't know what your literary agent will have to say, but... Yeah,
who knows, man. But now that would be kind of an interesting project to talk about why people like early humans, Is it that they don't want to look at the modern world, or what is it? That could be kind of fun, yeah.
Well, in terms of the literary agent, I believe when I last spoke with you, you hadn't long changed literary agent, and I also remember that you said that you were going a year without publishing a story.
Yeah, without publishing a novel, anyways, yeah.
Yeah, novel, sorry. Yeah. So I wondered, what lessons have you learned from your new literary agent, and also how the year of not publishing a novel went?
That it was my first year to not publish a novel in a long time. It's kind of terrifying, because I'm like, do I matter anymore? You realize how much, like, what I realized was how much I invest my self-worth in if I have something on the shelf, which is probably not a very healthy dynamic, but it is a dynamic which gets a lot of books on the shelves anyways, so I don't necessarily disparage it. But my new agent, BJ Robbins, she used to be the head of marketing at, Houghton Mifflin, and she was a senior editor, and then she went to agenting. So she's bringing all that experience to bear on all the projects that she takes on, which is really nice. Like when I gave her Mongrels was 42,000 words, just barely. I mean, if that even qualifies as a novel, to a lot of people it doesn't, like 60,000 words is the minimum threshold for a lot of publishers. But I gave that to her, and I had 2 or 3 other novels at the time, which I thought were pretty good too. But and also she had said that she's not into genre, but So I gave her this little broken, not even a not werewolf novel, and she said, yeah, it's got a beating heart. And so she worked with me, and she said, it needs this here, it needs that there, like the Layla chapter, it used to be called Mouth Breathers, but the one where he's at high school and doing the wolf kiss and all that stuff.
Right.
Like, I never would have written that if BJ had not told me we need to see him interacting with his age cohort, with his peers, because I thought I'd already done that when he has kind of a push fight with them kids in front of the convenience store, but she said, no, we need a lot more. We need to see him in contrast and working with his peers. And so I wrote that, and also that chapter with the bear, that didn't exist initially. She told me we need kind of a spike there. We need something kind of actiony, So I went in and wrote that, and then she also had me play with the order of it a little bit, and then the editor, once she got it, she had me. She didn't tell me put this here, put that there, but she told me it's all broken. It all sucks right now. She liked enough to buy it, but she said it doesn't work. And so I had to go through, and this took months. This took a lot longer than the initial writing of it did. This took probably 3 or 4 months. I had to just interrogate every single chapter for like what it was expressing and what it was doing in the larger scope of the novel. And then I had to like graph it all out and map it out and put it on calendars and everything, and just make it all dovetail together such that it could be a novel instead of just like a assorted bag of stories,
So they made you do a little bit more work than you're used to, but you learned a lot in the process.
I did learn a lot, yeah. And what you always think when you learn a lot in a process like that is, all right, I'm going to use that next time, and I'm going to just be the boss of that novel. I'm going to do it perfect. But I've found that's not the case. The next one's a totally different animal, so I'm having to use all different tools.
Right.
But it's like Mongrels takes place over like 10 years, I guess. This next novel I've done takes place over 6.5 days, which is takes just totally different stuff,
Well, I always find that as far as planning in a story, the scope, that the longer it is, I have to have a calendar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's basically what I do is I start way at the beginning and I do like chronological events, bam, 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 bam. And then somewhere right there at the beginning is where I go, okay, this is a great place to start,
mm-hmm.
And it gets basically, I don't like to start in the middle.
Uh-huh.
I find it after if I start in the middle, then the first, third of the book is me backtracking, explaining everything.
Yeah.
So I kind of start a little after the beginning, right at a good point to where, but I mean, if it's a 2 or 3 days, the whole story is going to take place in 2 or 3 days. I find I don't really need a calendar.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, bam, this happens, and then the rest of it is just, to me, it's almost like what they say. David Van May says there is no backstory.
Yeah.
There always is.
Yeah.
How much of it are you going to use?
Yeah.
And it's the backstory for me that makes me have to have a calendar. The more backstory, the more calendar I have to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I found that Google Calendar will let you go back to like, probably however far you want. I've gone back to the 90s, and it'll let you populate those days with events that your story is taking place in, It does not like going back that far. Every time, it always finds an excuse to fast forward you up to 2016 or whatever, and so you have to like click the back arrow 10,000 times more, But that I found that using like actual visual squares for days, calendars, is very helpful for me often, because when I fly by the seat of my pants, then I always end up with 6 things happening on Wednesday and nothing happening for the rest of the week, I mean, luckily,
it's like on this day, a lot of important shit happened.
Exactly.
And nothing else happened on the other days. It was just this day.
Yeah. However, when you're writing like a story or a novel that takes place in a really finite set of days, like 2 or 3 days or a week, you run into the Jack Bauer problem of when does this dude take a nap? Which you have to deal with. You have to just sometimes turn it off and let the protagonist go to his bunk and catch a few hours. Which is hard to do because that's boring time in the story.
Yeah, you just made me realize that in my recently published novella that my character did not sleep one single time. So,
Yeah,
I'm like, that's crazy. But oh well, no one else has said anything about it, so we'll just be quiet.
Well, I mean, Bob, There's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of hallucinations, there are explanations as to why no one's sleeping.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's like, I don't know. You always second guess yourself, and it's like,
Oh,
damn,
yeah.
the guy never slept. He was up for 3 days. What's the deal? You know?
Yeah.
Well, you just admitted it now. You could have came up with some profound explanation.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's who knows? I mean, was it real? Was it not real? So who knows? I mean, it's,
Yeah.
that's the whole point of it. So
Yeah.
You know, I found that the like storytelling space that I'm the most comfortable in, like when I feel like I'm really in the pocket, is when I have a novel that takes place over the course of a single work shift. You know, I feel like I'm really at home there. Like Flush Boy does that. It's like it takes place over, what is it, 4 or 6 hours, something like that, and that's I'm really, really comfortable in that space. Like Stuart Onan's novel Last Night at the Lobster, that felt so natural to me. It's about the very last shift at a Red Lobster before it closes down, and I just feel so comfortable to me. I'm not sure why that is. I think it could just be like some sort of reaction to how difficult it always is to cross time in a novel, you know, because your impulse is to document every single footstep, but that, of course, is way too tedious. It slows the story down way too much, so you have to find places you can fast forward and paraphrase. It's identifying those places that's really difficult, and it could be that my reaction to that is to not do any fast forwarding, just to document every minute of 4 hours, you know? But I think I come to that from kind of growing up watching Die Hard like 10,000 times, you know, because that takes place in just a matter of hours, of course. And it always felt really authentic to me, how we are always with either John McClane or Hans, and it's all like clicking together like minute after minute, you know. That just feels really, really natural to me.
Well, you have to avoid he walked here, he walked there, he walked there. So, it's eventually, the reader's going to realize that this person is walking.
Yep.
They're driving if it's at a different location. They're not using some type of machine to portal themselves to there, unless it's science fiction. So I mean, and it took me a long time to get rid of that stuff, and I had beta readers just come in and just say, look, man, we know he's going there, just get him there. It doesn't matter how, so it's like try a car. No.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's the same problem you see when people first come to first person. If they're natural third person writers, they'll come to first person and they'll say, I heard the car start. I saw the bird fly. I felt the seat was cold. When you don't need to put yourself in front of all those. You can just say the car started, the bird flew, the seat was cold, and we're going to know that you felt, saw, and heard all that. You know.
Exactly.
And the idea of documenting everything, is that a particular problem you see with writers on the creative writing course that you teach, in terms of people just starting out?
I don't think it's something that I see all the time. I mean, maybe I'm sensitive to it, so I probably see it more than I would otherwise. But let me think. I'm trying to think of what the most common problem is I see in beginning writers. And I think the most common problem I see in beginning writers is it's kind of what Bob was talking about. It's that they start the story where they started telling the story instead of where the story naturally starts, so they do like 2-3 pages of warm up, and then the catalyst happens, which sets all the events in motion. And those first 2.5 pages are really them trying to set up the world and establish the character. But nowadays on the contemporary fiction scene, you have to do that on the run, man. You start with an explosion, and then while people are running away from that, you introduce the world and those characters,
And I could see how what you're describing could be useful for them as a creative writing exercise to get momentum, but obviously, the error is if you're not backtracking and cutting that out of the final draft that you ultimately submit. Yeah,
no, exactly. That's the trick. You may have come upon a lucky turn of phrase or a neat angle to look at something, or just a good insight, but you've got to be, a grown-up about it and kill it, and only keep those things which contribute to the story, not the things that make you look smart,
I think one of the things that I used to suffer from was just so much self-doubt, which would create a paralysis in terms of submitting stories. But it's only as I've been doing This Is Horror, as I've been speaking with more experienced writers, that I've realized, oh shit, everyone has self-doubt. It doesn't actually get any better. So then that can either be a really freeing or a really depressing realization. But I think for me, it's like when you realize, okay, there's always going to be some level of self-doubt. It's like, well, then I'm free. I'm free to submit because that's the way it is.
That is the way it is, man. Like even like Mongrels, it's already getting reviews and stuff, and there's good reviews and there's reviews that aren't as positive, and talking about the self-doubt, I always like believe the bad reviews in a way that I know I shouldn't. You always think that I'm just faking it. They're all going to see through it now. They're going to see that I'm just making this stuff up.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous in a way, the amount of people that we've heard that have said things like that. And I think it was Paul Tremblay talking about after A Head Full of Ghosts, he was feeling really worried that he wouldn't be able to live up to that. And to someone like me, to hear stuff from people like you and Paul and Nathan Ballingrud, it blows my mind.
I think there's always going to be self-doubt. I think a lot of it is just it's just normal. It's any type of creative endeavor. Am I worthy? Phase. And the thing that really helps me out, especially over the last year, was remembering that after everything was said and done, that I still managed to send the wrong file to an editor.
Yes.
So, and it's like, if you can go, okay, you know what? It doesn't matter. You're still a dumbass.
Yeah.
And it's your own fault.
Yeah.
So then none of that other stuff really matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, every time though, it's like I submit now. It's like it takes me 20 minutes before I triple check.
Yeah.
It's just the right one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've got to where I'm even naming them different. Final. Dot, final.
Well, what I found kind of works, because I do that as well, is if I have a directory that I keep clear, like called staging area or something, and if I copy my final copy to that staging area, then when I go to attach it, if I only go to that directory, then I can only pick the right file,
Right.
Yeah.
I've started doing things like that as well. It's just,
yeah.
You have to, because or you're going to continue to send, Unfortunately, that time it was J. David Osborne, so he was "Oh, it's cool, dude. I do that all the time." So you're like, "Oh,
yeah, yeah."
Yeah, well, Google Mail has a feature to tell you if you've said you've attached something and you haven't, but they've yet to develop a tool to tell you you've attached the old file. I don't know how they do that, but I wouldn't be surprised if in years to come they did invent something like that, particularly if you were keeping all of your documents on the Google Drive. But then well, I know from conversations with you, Stephen, that you would probably never do that because you don't trust Google anyway. But that's another conversation entirely.
Yeah. I am big on like having my stuff in triplicate, 3 different places or something, because I have, we've all lost data and we know that sucks, so.
Oh yeah, I've got a lot of cloud storage. I've got external hard drives. There's the internal hard drive, just backing things up as many places and in as many different ways as you can.
Definitely, man.
And you could do all that and still lose stuff. It's amazing. It's happened to me recently. And it's just, it's very frustrating, but you just you move through it.
Yeah.
Well, you said in terms of not publishing a novel for a year that there was a psychological strain in terms of doing that, and I wonder, financially, was there much of an impact?
No, because I actually had money coming in from Mongrels, so it wasn't. It was very, very similar to what it had been, So, but it was more just about I mean, psychological, but it's probably really emotional or something, you know,
Mm.
like, yeah, it just felt weird to suddenly not be on the shelves, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tying that in somewhat to another question we've got from Patreon. So Thomas Joyce wants to ask about your teaching job and if you ever aim to, or if there's a desire at all to quit that day job so you could focus even further on writing full time. And then linked to that, have you ever considered teaching a writing course online?
I have taught online before, actually. I've done it for Lit Reactor, I've done it for the Cult. You know, I do lots of like one hit workshops too. One hit, that's probably the wrong word, but like I'm teaching at Clarion this summer, and different places just pull me in for a 3 or 5 day workshop, and that's tends to be kind of fun, you know. But you know, sometimes some days I think, you know, if I cash out or something, then maybe I would quit teaching. But then again, I like being in the classroom so much. The students, they keep me like connected to the world in a way that I kind of doubt I would stay connected otherwise. You know, because given my own tendencies, I'll stay here with my old Simon and Simon episodes and my Bob Seger albums, and I'll be totally happy. I'll be insulated in the world I grew up in, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
my job as a novelist is not to stay in 1984. You know, my job as a novelist is to keep forging into the new world and or new worlds. You know, just the happening world, and try to write stories that interact with it. You know, and so what my students do is they tell me about new comedians, new songs, new movies, stuff that I would otherwise miss, and also they speak in languages that they use words that I don't have any idea what they are. You know, and it really is it like triggers parts of my mind that I don't think would be triggered otherwise when I hear them say these words in ways that I can't even comprehend at first. I have to slow down and ask them what they meant, you know?
Mm. Yeah, I know when I was speaking with David Moody, so
Mm-hmm.
he, over the last year or so, went back to work on a part-time basis, having been writing full-time for a number of years, and
Mm-hmm.
he he was surprised at how much he actually really enjoyed it and enjoyed that connection with other people. And yeah,
Yeah,
I can see how you could unknowingly become a little bit isolated in
yeah.
doing that. I mean, I hope that doesn't happen to me when I go full time at the end of next month, but we'll find out.
I bet this is horrible. Keep you connected, man.
Oh yeah, I think so. Well,
Yeah.
I was going to say my students speak in languages I don't understand either, but it's a little bit of a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Thomas also asked, and I guess he was a very astute listener to the podcast we did with you
Mm-hmm.
back in episode 29.
Mm-hmm.
Have you figured out the secret to writing a good rom-com novel yet? I don't know
I
if you even remember mentioning that,
no,
but yeah.
no, I do, and
Yeah.
I think I just said it to somebody else too in an interview. But
Yeah.
um, I have not figured out the secret, no, but I am still chipping away at it. You know,
Yeah.
I really still think the rom com is one of the most, I don't know, authentic forms, genres, modes, whatever you call it. You know, and I would really like to engage it at a meaningful level.
I did have some another question about mongrels,
Yeah, man.
as I wanted to kind of talk or see if you were willing to talk a little bit more about the Near Dark connection.
Oh yeah, man. I saw Near Dark. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it on VHS, so it probably would have been 89 or 90, right around there. I think it came out in 87. And man, I remember when I saw that, it just blew my mind because by that time I was familiar with the typical Hollywood representation of the vampire. You know, the high velvet collar and all. You know, the pale skin, all that, just all the typical stuff. And you know, I knew Lestat and all that by then too, I guess. But Near Dark, what it told me, or what it showed me, I guess, was a vampire I could believe in. You know, it was a creature that isn't wrapped up in some big centuries-long war with other paranormal creatures, and it wasn't being hunted by a generations-long species of hunters with all these specialized weapons and all that. And they weren't fighting Nazis. They weren't trying to win back the daylight or anything like that. They were just trying to eat. It's as simple as that. They just wanted to eat to subsist, and they were doing it in the best way they knew how. They were living in vans with blacked out windows, just kind of limping from town to town and using their various scams and tricks to get people out in the dark to drink some blood from them, and they didn't have full bank accounts. They wouldn't have passed a credit check at the used car lot. And this was, number one, this was people I knew, people I lived with. This was my family. This was us. But number two, it made the vampire real to me. It brought the vampire into my world, I guess, because the vampire had always been other. It had always been up there, like some elite, high-class society thing, But this was a monster that operated at the same social strata I did, and it made it both wondrous and more terrifying for that reason. And I do think that imprinted me in a way such that Mongrels is the novel I wrote, 25, 30 years later, whatever it is, because that's what these werewolves are. They're not involved in some big struggle, some generational conflict. They're not fighting other paranormal creatures. They're not fighting Nazis or anything. They're just trying to get some food in their bellies, and they're trying to live without getting burned up alive. And so they move from town to town, find whatever work they can, steal what they can't, and move again the next week,
Yeah, that was the impression I got. As soon as I started reading it, I immediately thought of Near Dark.
Man, that's wonderful. That's such an honor. Yeah.
and it, so much so that I actually started trying to hunt down the soundtrack to it.
Oh wow!
And because I'm like, oh, and I had like a blank moment. I was like, who did that? And I was like, oh wait, it's Tangerine Dream. So. And I was like, shoot, I'm gonna listen to it, So I listened to it, and it's, of course, it's exactly just, and I had the movie, but I was like, I'm not gonna watch the movie right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid if I watch it while I'm reading this book, that it's gonna taint any feeling. So I said, I'm really, really just gonna try to focus on the story.
Cool.
And at the end. I was like, okay, there's definitely a connection there, and that's what I felt. And of course, there's the connections with every werewolf movie, book, and it also got me thinking that werewolf fiction is really lacking. There's not, compared to vampires, and I don't want to get into a mathematical fraction.
Yeah.
Again, but like if we put it into a fraction, Michael, mathematician there, it would probably be like maybe 10%.
Yeah.
If you look at here you got vampires and you have werewolves, then werewolf fiction is 10% of those two.
Yeah.
The other 90% is vampires. And in all genres, romantic, urban fantasy, horror, whatever. And then and it's like, golly, why is that? And so these are questions you can sit there and ponder all day long, and you'll probably never have an answer to it.
Yeah.
But Mongrels does something for the werewolf that's never been done. And it's like, golly, man, thank you. That was awesome.
Well, thank you for just like being sensitive to that, because I myself have always been very aware of people saying that the werewolf doesn't have its Frankenstein, it doesn't have its Dracula. We've had some good werewolf novels, don't get me wrong. We've had Christopher Buehlman's Those Across the River, Toby Barlow's Sharp Teeth, Benjamin Percy, Red Moon, Eric Nunnally, Blood for the Sun, Carrie Vaughn's Kitty stuff. I should have had a list. I'm sure I'm forgetting something vital. Oh, Robert McCammon's The Wolf's Hour, George R. R. Martin's Skin Trade. We've had some really good stuff, but I agree. We haven't had something like Max Brooks's World War Z. That kind of redefines the whole creature in a way, and
right.
And you asked earlier, I didn't answer it. I forgot to. What tropes I was working with and against in the werewolf. And this just kind of wrapped up in that answer because coming up, I mean, the werewolf, yeah, Near Dark was amazing, and but so was the Howling. Like for me, the werewolf was always the most fascinating creature. It was the creature I wanted to be. I was willing at the drop of a dime to trade all in to be a werewolf. Because werewolves are cool, man. You get to run through the mesquite and eat whatever you want to. Nobody can catch you. That's a dream. When you're growing up in West Texas, that's the dream. I think you don't dream about flying like a vampire or anything, or being fast like a vampire, because West Texas is all about the sunlight. So being a vampire would pretty much suck, But
yeah.
But being a werewolf, you can get away with that in West Texas, I think. However, all these werewolves that I kept reading about and watching, they never seemed like a biological animal that actually made sense to me. They never seemed like a species. They didn't adhere to conservation of mass. A 160-pound woman would turn into a 280-pound werewolf, and I never could think where those extra 120 pounds coming from the ether, from magic, from the curse, from the virus. That never makes sense to me. And and a big thing that I had to deal with Mongrels, which really informed the whole book, was the Wolfman, 1941, Lon Chaney Jr. You remember that Bela Lugosi, when he comes through town and ends up biting that woman who is the chaperone of Larry and Gwen. I forget her name now, but she's the third wheel that Gwen brings along so that Larry won't turn all predatory because she's engaged and all this stuff. When Bela Lugosi bites her, he's a 4-footed werewolf. You can see him.
He's
yeah.
full.
Yeah, he's full out. He's full on wolf. Then he bites Larry, and or Lawrence Talbot, and Lawrence Talbot turns into this hybrid, this man body with wolf features. And that never made sense to me. I didn't understand why Talbot did not become the same thing that had bitten him, and the only explanation I could come up with was that Bela Lugosi's character, who was also called Bella, I think, had been born into it. He had been born with a body that could contain the transformation, whereas Talbot was simply infected by someone like that, and so his body was not built for it. It couldn't take the transformation. It could just get halfway there, and getting halfway there meant that the pain of that fizzled out his brain and made him just an eating machine. It made him mad and angry and hungry and bitey, and he's meant to, like those kind of, like the Moondogs and Mongrels. They're short lived. They burn out fast because they're out there in the public biting everything they can. Whereas the Bellas, the wolves that are born into it, they might not control it totally, but they're not in as constant a state of pain as the hybrids, the man wolves. So they can get away with it a little bit.
And that's one of the cool things about the story is that you take that idea and you put it into the story. And then it reminds me, I used to work with this guy who would always take, like, if you told said something that was kind of naughty, there was always that one guy who would, put it in the garbage can. Uh-huh. But in a good way, everyone would laugh, but it would also, make you kind of throw up.
Yeah.
And it's like you take these ideas and it's stuff that you go deeper than what you see on the surface, and you go, well, then they would be eating machines.
Yeah.
But then you're like, oh wait, but there's another aspect. They could breed. Mm-hmm. And then and I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, whoa. I would have never thought of that. I'm not worthy. And it's just like that. And I noticed that that's one of the things in your fiction that draws so many people to it is you're fearless, and you take an idea and take it to its extreme, and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, and as far as how it affects the characters, and then to me that's just, oh man. I hope my mind it begins to work like that at some level one day. That would be awesome.
Cool. Well, cool. Thank you. But yeah, I definitely am trying to plumb the werewolf and just make it into a creature that people can believe in. I want the werewolf to be real for people. I want, I suspect I want. In 2002, we went away from the vampire. The vampire was on the road to being sparkly and everything. In 2002, it gave us what, Resident Evil and 28 Days Later and the Zombie Survival Guide all at once, and that kind of started the zombie renaissance, you know. And then Max Brooks props it up even more with World War Z, and then The Walking Dead props it up even higher. And I think we're at the tail end of the zombie renaissance right now. And since we came from vampires to get to zombies, I really feel like we're primed and ready for werewolves to be the next creature, because the audience or the market or the industry, maybe all three together, we cycle back and forth, or we cycled through our like universal pictures, creatures action set, you know, and that's really just three things. That's the zombie, the vampire, and the werewolf. You know, I mean, there's the mummy. The mummy has never really gone wide. Phantom of the Opera doesn't really go wide either. Maybe the Phantom of the Opera kind of started out the whole slasher thing in a way, with the mask and the burn face and all. But I don't know. But the three creatures we cycle back and forth from are vampire, zombie, and werewolf, and I really feel like it's the werewolf's turn. You know, for too long, werewolves have been just the guard dog, the attack dog, the sled puller. You know, and I think
one could make the argument also for the, creature for the Black Lagoon. But I mean, what's its origins? And then you realize that, hey, weird fiction's having a massive renaissance right now. So there's the creature. You know.
No, it totally is. I agree. Well, also, there's a guy, Peter Grimbaugh. He has a novella about the creature from the Black Lagoon, which is so good. I wish everybody would read it, and I wish I had it right here at hand so I could tell you the title of it. But his name is Peter Grimbaugh, Grandblis. But you might be right. It could be that the tentacly nature of the creature is somehow engendered or inspired the whole H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu thing, or worked in tandem with that anyways to deliver us up on the shore as we are now, you know?
Right.
Yeah. That's a cool way to think about it. I never had considered that. But yeah, I really hope that the werewolf gets its time in the light now. And I think that, you were talking about how werewolf stories tend to be a small portion of the big monster pie, you know? And I think that's because werewolves have what's basically like what I call a low scourge index. Like zombies and vampires, they can both breed, proliferate out of control, such that they become like this boiling mass on the horizon that's going to come eat Chicago, you know? That never happens with werewolves. Werewolf stories tend to be silver bullet, you know? Look at me, I'm having a pretty fun life, but somebody in my town is killing somebody in my town is a werewolf, you know? Werewolf stories tend to be one werewolf in a small town or in a small community of some sort, which is to say the whole world is not in peril. What's in peril is the community, you know? And I mean, that's what happens in Mongrels time and again. It's never the whole world that this family is going to take down on accident or on purpose. It's always their situation in this community that is in peril, you know? But I mean, I'm not saying that werewolves have never gone had a high scourge index. They have, but it's not been told in a compelling way anyways. I think Michael Chabon had hundreds and hundreds of werewolves in his novel Summerland, but they were just being used as sled dogs to pull a ship across ice, I think, you know. And there's been a couple of movies that have werewolves just go crazy, and Benjamin Percy does it in Red Moon. Like a whole portion of the United States is now the Lycan United States or whatever it is, you know. And so I mean, people have tried definitely to make the werewolf be scary on a global scale, you know. But my suspicion is the werewolf operates best in those small communities, you know, which probably has a lot to do with why I plant it in the Southeast, because there's a lot of small little insular communities down there. You know, I think the biggest town they go to is Hattiesburg, no, Jacksonville, I guess. But they're never there for very long in the big places. Werewolves are best out past the city limits, just living in a trailer, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We would be interesting to see HBO do some sort of television series with the werewolf, and I think, like you say, like really it should be coming up now. We've had a lot of zombie and vampire fiction things in both books and television, and I mean, of course, we have seen werewolves feature in various TV shows, but they're never the central focus. So you had them as the rival gangs in True Blood. You have werewolves in things like Being Human, but there doesn't seem to be a dedicated werewolf television TV series.
Yeah, the only ones that there's Bitten, that it's out of Canada, I think, or it's on the Sci-Fi Channel. It's kind of fun. The first couple seasons I like them, and then there's also Teen Wolf, but the first season of Teen Wolf is all werewolves, but after that it goes crazy and there's all kinds of other creatures involved, and that to me is always that's kind of the moment I tend to check out of a werewolf story, be it on TV, Cineplex, or the shelf, the bookshelf, is when the whole novel is werewolves versus zombies, or no, that didn't happen. Werewolves versus vampires, because that kind of, instead of making it really be about the creatures, I can always read that as West Side Story. It's this gang against that gang, and they're evenly matched, and it's really just. And then I wonder, why are these werewolves and vampires? Why can't they just be jocks and punks or something? It would be the same story. And and anytime you have a fantastic element in a story, I think you need to be able to say the story does not work without that fantastic element, or the story can be told more economically with that fantastical element. Anyways, and when you truck other paranormal creatures in with werewolves, then I probably selfishly just think that takes the spotlight away from the werewolf, and I always want the spotlight on the werewolf.
Yeah.
Well, they've just been like a second banana, for so long. It's like you got Underworld, and it's like the werewolves, that one black guy with the deep voice played probably the best werewolf ever.
Yeah, he was good. Yeah,
and he was even better when he wasn't a wolf.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. And it's like, and then it's people getting attacked, and it's like, you really don't know anything about them. And it's always the victim, and it's refreshing to see something different, and I never read Red Moon. I started to, and then I got tied up with something else, but I definitely need to read it because, it is an excellent piece of werewolf fiction from what I understand, but it's just, to me, part of it may even seem like it's almost the same, but is what we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the This Is Horror podcast with Stephen Graham Jones. We will be back in a couple of weeks with part 2 of the interview. Next week, we will bring you part 2 of our interview with Scott Nicolay. So that will be going live on Monday, the 16th of May. And I have a funny feeling that it won't be the last time that you will hear Scott Nicolay and This Is Horror working together. So if you've enjoyed the podcast, if you enjoyed the show, please do consider heading on over to our Patreon and pledging just $1 per month. There are all sorts of rewards and bonuses, including ebooks, including early bird access to the podcast, and even the This Is Horror t-shirt, which we will be unveiling very, very soon. It's just a great way to show that you like what we do and you think it's worth paying for, and it ensures that the podcast keeps on going. So if you want to get involved with that, then just simply head on over to www.patreon.com/thisishorror. Alright, so with that said, thank you once again for listening. Look after one another, take care of yourselves, and have a great day.
Oh, hey Bob, your icon is BP. Like, is that the oil company? No? Is that right?
No. That's it's definitely not the oil company. It stands for big person. No, it stands for Bob Pastrella. Hey, yeah.